WBO has officially ordered a heavyweight clash between unified champion Oleksandr Usyk and former title holder Joseph Parker, a move that could shake up the division's landscape. With Usyk, there may be plans for a rubber match with Tyson Fury for the undisputed crown, but the WBO's mandatory order puts him in a tight corner. Usyk may choose to relinquish the belt rather than jeopardize the Fury bout or overextend himself with back-to-back defenses. Prioritizing legacy and a clean sweep of the heavyweight division, Usyk could vacate the title, giving Parker a shot at reclaiming the championship. The next few weeks will reveal whether Usyk defends or sacrifices his belt in pursuit of undisputed immortality.
So let's move to video and let's talk about this fight that the WBO has ordered and if the fight will go through. I've got some notes with me, and I think one of the questions is if this fight doesn't go through, then what are the reasons? Clearly, one of the reasons that are not valid is that Usyk would be worried. I don't think that would be a valid reason. But what may be valid, and let's take Usyk out of the equation, is that some people will relinquish a title if there's a bigger money fight ahead. So let's create a fictional person. If you've got John and John's a champion, and then he's ordered to fight another champion, but this would make 5 million, but he might be able to fight someone else for 30 million, then he may relinquish the title because there's a bigger fight. Now, when we say bigger fight, that can be multifarious because there's money and then there's legacy. So that could be one of the things. And I'm intrigued about the business element of boxing because myself, someone who does business, I'm always intrigued about the economic side. Now, predominantly, my interest in boxing is about the actual boxing, the philosophy of boxing, the science of boxing. But I actually am now currently drawn to the economics, or I'm curious. I am curious about the economics of boxing. So one of the things when you're negotiating for a boxing match, from my understanding, is the purse split. So how much of the purse goes to whom? And according to my research, you would have typically a 75-25 in favor of the champion. So the champion gets 75 and the challenger gets 25. And I can understand the logic behind this because the champion is taking a huge risk and therefore is being compensated in taking that risk and therefore takes a greater majority of the purse. Now, obviously exceptions can apply. So if the challenger has a massive following, then in some cases they could get equal or even more. I believe in the Anthony Joshua, when Anthony Joshua fought Charles Martin, I believe his purse was big, and I'm not sure if it was the same or more than Charles Martin, but he was the challenger. But because of his media, because of his branding, and because of how popular he was the one, I guess, that was bringing in the money. He was the one who was bringing in the attention, and that was seen in the negotiating table as having more value. And you would say that that's probably correct. With bringing more attention comes more value, and that value translates into money. Typically, I think as well, Lennox Lewis didn't fight Riddick Bowe, but when Riddick Bowe was the undisputed champion, I believe he offered a purse of a 90-10 split to Lennox Lewis. I believe, I could be wrong about that, but that fight never transpired. But there was an offer, but that offer, I guess from Lennox Lewis's perspective, was so disproportionate that I'm assuming it was declined, or they couldn't reach an appropriate settlement. Now, another thing that you'll hear about in like fights, and let's say like Joseph Parker and Oleksandr Usyk, they got 30 days to negotiate this fight, is the rematch clause. And my understanding of a rematch clause is that when you have the fight, then there will be an automatic rematch, and this would be the preference to the champion. So for example, if Joseph Parker beats Usyk, he will have to give Usyk a rematch. And then typically a rematch clause will have a 30 days activation period, and that's 30 days to activate the rematch. And then that rematch would need to happen within the period of 4 to 6 months. So I think that's a typical clause in a contract. Now, typically things can be negotiated, and then when you got, say, like the split of Joseph Parker, Usyk, say if it's 75-25 or 80-20, that split would then typically be reversed. But if I was negotiating on Usyk's behalf, I would be negotiating for the same split if he loses. Now, obviously, if the challenger loses, they wouldn't, that there would be no rematch clause. So clearly in this negotiation, Usyk will be holding the cards. He is the money guy. He has, a high level of credibility. He is a very popular media personality. Joseph Parker also has a very reputable brand and is also a known personality within the boxing cycles, and he's an exciting fighter. But Usyk, it's like if Joseph Parker is here, respectively, Usyk is up here. And that's not taking anything away from Joseph Parker. Speaking of rematch clauses, one of the popular rematch clauses, of course, was the Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn rematch clause. Or even just the contract. There was a rehydration clause where I believe that Chris Eubank could not go beyond 10 pounds. I think it was the day before the fight. So there was that variable. But then there was the other element of they've negotiated the same conditions for the first fight for the second fight. And I believe it had the same economic splits. So again, that's another, another example where there's no belt on the line, but they've done a pre-negotiation of a rematch clause. And I believe the rehydration clause meant that Chris Eubank Jr. benefited economically. So in order for him to take the £10 rehydration clause, that he had to be financially compensated for that. Also, my understanding is that when you have contracts, you might have other details. Who walks out second, because that's seen as an advantage. Because if you can walk out second, you can keep the first person who walked out first waiting. The gloves, that's an important one. Typically, I've given the example many times of Evander Holyfield versus Lennox Lewis. There was a debate or there was conflict about the gloves. Holyfield wanted the bigger gloves. Lennox Lewis wanted the gloves that are considered puncher's gloves, where you can feel the knuckle. Obviously, with Lennox Lewis being the heavier fighter and the harder puncher, he wanted a particular type of glove, where Evander wanted the heavier gloves. I guess, more padding to be able to block the shots, etc. So there's that element. And also there's ring size. Interestingly, when Lennox Lewis fought Ray Mercer, the ring size was tiny, and that really compromised Lennox Lewis's performance because he wasn't able to use lateral movement, or he wasn't able to use effective lateral movement in that fight. That's not taking away anything from Ray Mercer, because he was phenomenal that night. He had a phenomenal performance. He had another phenomenal performance against Evander Holyfield previously, but the small ring was something that was negotiated, and I believe that was negotiated by the great Don King, who is a master at negotiation. So there's all these variables. There's also promotional conflicts. So I believe with the introduction of, the Saudis getting involved, this has become less of a factor. But in theory, there is a promotional conflict in this negotiation between Usyk and Parker. Joseph Parker is under Queensberry rules, which is Frank Warren, which their broadcaster is TNT, while Usyk's promoter is Alex, and that's under K2 Promotions, and their broadcaster is TNT and DAZN. But it appears with, like I said, with with the new context of boxing, that these promotional conflicts are not negating the big fights. So previously, if you take, say, like when Evander Holyfield fought Lennox Lewis, there would have been some promotional conflicts. This would have been a very difficult fight to negotiate. But in today's context, not so much. So, this is going to be very interesting to see if Usyk feels that this fight is going to be beneficial. And I guess the question is it economically beneficial, and is it beneficial for his legacy? And I think at this point, with all the millions that he made, particularly from the Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua fights, he would probably be thinking about his legacy. He definitely comes across as a people's champion. So he'll probably be asking the question, how much money will I make? But more importantly, does this fight capture the public imagination? Because I think the Daniel Dubois fights, the Tyson Fury fights, and the Anthony Joshua fights, they really captured the public's imagination. For me, if I was Usyk's promoter, I'd be trying to negotiate a massive split, perhaps an 80-20, 85-15 split. With regards to the gloves, that's a difficult one, because now Usyk is punching very hard, so I'm not sure the gloves would make a massive difference. I'd probably just try and negotiate the type of gloves that Usyk prefers to wear, and then try to impose that on the opposition. I think the ring size, again, depends on the type of fight that Usyk wants to fight. If he wants to move, then we need a bigger ring that will be beneficial for him. If he's looking to close the distance, then we need a smaller ring. I get the sense that because both of these fighters have high boxing intelligence, that they may not know how the fight's going to go. There may be elements of when Usyk is stalking, and there may be elements of when Usyk is moving. So again, that type of negotiation would be tricky. And again, it would be a rematch clause with the same split, considering all the value that Usyk is bringing to the table, and considering how much Joseph Parker would benefit from a victory. I would negotiate a rematch, which would be 85-15, 90-10, etc. So I think that they have most of the cards here. But this is a massive opportunity for Joseph Parker. But again, I just think that the contracts, this seems to be a massively overlooked part of boxing. There was quite a lot of speculation on the Eubank-Conor contract, but generally speaking, this is overlooked. But this is a very interesting part of boxing.